Okay, here we go. Welcome to the next guide. Today we are going to be doing the armor of our sexy marine. Again, it's non-metallic metal and it's going to be green. He is a salamander. So we're going to be working on that, getting the salamander look and feel going on with a non-metallic added to it. Now, as for which colors to use, I'm a bit of a, I don't know. Let's start from flat green from Vallejo model color. We can base coat the armor with this color here, and then from there work up all the various details. I am going to be looking left a little bit because I'm trying to follow the color scheme of salamanders, but I'm not exactly sure what is the color scheme. So we're going to be working on that. For now, let's just worry about base coating. I kept the shield separate for obvious reasons. It can get really hard to paint with the shield in the way. So we're gonna keep that separate. I'm gonna base coat our armor. I'm going to try to stay away from the recesses so that I get a nice black line, but even if I don't manage to, it's fine, I can always fix that. For now, I'm not going to worry about the OSL just yet. I'm instead only looking into getting this green all over the armor, locked in and ready to go. Okay, so we finally did it. We base coated the armor, and from this color we can start working up our highlights. I'm going to be using Vallejo model color Sunny Skin Tone. I love this color. I use it very often as an highlight color, and I think it's gonna work out really nicely here too because it's a very bright orangish yellow color, which works amazingly with green because you know green is close to yellow on the color wheel. And by being close to it, it means that it highlights really nicely when you add the yellow to it. So we got our highlight color. I mixed the two, I don't know, 60-40, a lot more green than yellow. And we can sketch in the whole armor now with these colors. So I'm just gonna block this color in all of the areas where I feel like there will be light. I'm not worried about blending yet. I'm just worried about doing a good job in understanding the volumes and highlighting them properly. By volume understanding, I mean simply put, looking at everything I am painting and be like, okay, so what is the geometrical shape that is closest to this object I am painting? And once I know the geometrical shape, I can be like, well then, I guess I will highlight it like such. The leg is a cylinder, so I'm highlighting it like cylinders get light. See? The shield up here is kinda rounded. I don't know if you can see it. It's kinda rounded. So the bottom of it will be catching light, while the top will be fairly dark. just building up the light. I'm not going too far into bright just yet, and it's important that you don't either. It's important to move up slowly with your highlights when doing non-metallic. Another big part of painting non-metallics is having, considering that the amount of highlights has to pretty much be the same across the whole model. How do you build up a focal point? Well, you build up a focal point by the same thing we said about the Necron on the base, by having bigger highlights on the upper areas and smaller highlights in the lower areas. So I'm going to be highlighting the model exactly with the same colors, but the highlights on the legs are going to be much smaller, more contained than the ones on the face, for example. In this case, I'm almost entirely covering the base coat green in favor of this brighter green. And that's going to help us create a nice, interesting look. Again, I'm also sketching right now. I'm not really looking into getting any fantastic blending just yet. Okay? Okay? Adding some secondary highlights already if I feel like the area is too flat. Like for example this leg guard here looked a bit flat. So we can add some secondary lights. Again, we just sketch them in, we don't have to commit to them. We can always cover them or change things up as we go. The upper part of that shoulder is gonna be very bright. As well as the top of the backpack. For now I'm just building up coverage. The model is going to be observed from this direction, sorta. So it doesn't really matter which one of the two edges we highlight the most. But I think it's gonna be cooler if we highlight this and have a shadow on the opposite side, so we can play with the edge highlights in shadow in of the helmet. And I'm going across the whole model rather than building up the entirely painting only one area of it, because I believe it's easier to understand if how the model will look globally if you paint it all at the same time, especially when doing non-metallic. I think I mentioned this already, but if I was painting this model on my own without having any audience, I would be base coating all of the details and highlight all of the details all together. So I would do the highlight here on the armor, then move on something else, do the highlight there, then go back to the armor after finishing all of the highlights and build up the whole model together. I think it's harder for you to understand it though, what I'm doing if I do it that way, which is why we're doing it this way. But it's important that if you paint one detail only, like this, it's fine, just complete it entirely, so that you can get an understanding of how it's gonna look like. Especially when doing non-metallic, because you need to build up that focal point, right? That light happening, and the only way to do it is by looking at it being born, really, on your model in an organic way. Okay, so we got our first highlight in. Let's add more of this yellow. And we can do our second highlight. Inside of our previous highlight, we're going to be slapping this one. Also, I just noticed I entirely forgot to paint the knee on. I didn't base coat it nor highlight the knee here, so I'm just gonna do it quickly. Also the leg, wow. Okay. Back to sketching in our highlights. We're painting this in inside of the area of the previous highlight. We're not entirely covering the previous highlights, we're just painting this in. I'm going to push these lights more towards the chest so that we get that focality that I've been talking about. There we go. Be careful with the coverage because it's very easy to not get any coverage. Uh, Greens and yellows don't usually cover too greatly. And you know, when you mix them together, you get something that doesn't cover too well. So always make sure that you are completely covering with your sketch. Even though we are sketching, we still want coverage out of these paints, okay? We don't want them to be just, you know, stains. We want coverage. Maybe we don't care much for coverage on the edges of the highlight so that we can blend it a bit easily, but the body, the main frame of it, we want to cover. I forgot to sketch in the highlights in this area here, so I'm just gonna quickly do it. We also mix a bit more of this color. Adding a bit of a secondary highlight to make the non-metallic look a bit more beautiful. Because, again, another way to make non-metallic interesting is by increasing the amount of light present on the object. So you can always add little glints of light using one of your highlights, not the brightest, but one of the highlights you have, to push the interesting look out of the metallic. If you do just one highlight, it's never gonna look truly metallic. The only way to make it look really metallic is by having all of these different lights. They don't have to be blended, they just have to be there. Like, if you place them correctly, they will look really nice. This is a rounded surface, which means that the bottom of it will also be reflecting some light, not only the top. Of course, not as bright as the highlights on the top, but still some of it will be there. So we can have our secondary highlights here in the bottom of these rounded shoulder pads. Rounded backpack BBDs. But we also want it in the shoulder pads as well. Like so. And here too, some light, just a little bit. I'm gonna be reinforcing this sketching here because it didn't cover too well. As well as this one. Alright. Doing well so far. Let's keep moving on. I am purposely ignoring the inner part of the legs because I'm gonna have to have a little bit of a OSL in it, right? I mean, he's on top of lava after all. But for now, we can ignore it and just keep going with the non-metallic. So I'm gonna be using pretty much pure sunny skin tone for our second to last highlight. Again, working this color inside of the area of the previous highlight, which should mean something to you, right? What it means is that the real effort in painting non-metallic is placing the first highlight. Because once you have placed the first highlight and you have chosen the right size for it, the right placement, all of the other highlights just fall into place on top of it. So it's very important to pick the right spot for the first highlight and the right size, because you do want to have that growth in light, right? My highlights are very small on the legs compared to the face and chest, and in doing so I am achieving a good focal point, even though I'm using the same colors. Just not as much. That doesn't mean you have to feel like pressured into doing a perfect first highlight, mind you. Like you can try non-metallic and try to learn it in many different ways. You don't have to do the perfect first highlight in order to get a good non-metallic, so don't dwell too much on it. You can always fix it later. And I mean, even though I understand non-metallic fairly well, there's a very high chance I will end up changing some of the elements on this non-metallic once I'm done with it. Just because, I would feel like it. Something might not work as well as I want it to, and I will fix it. One thing I know for sure is that I might want to add some more shadows to this, push that contrast. Okay? Okay. Okay? Now, I might want to go to pure white and call this armor done. But what I believe would look cool, considering we're working on a GW model, which means overly saturated, colorful stuff, would be cool to give some more saturation to this armor. And a good way to do it would be through an ink glaze. That ink glaze, though, cannot happen if we don't blend. A little bit, at least. Because blending after an ink glaze is difficult because you don't really have the color that comes out of the tinting. So you have to mix it, and it gets really, really difficult if you're not experienced. So my suggestion is, if we feel like our model is missing some tones, we can first blend and then glaze those tones in. But before we do any of that, I want to push the shadows a little bit. So I'm just gonna add some black to my green, base coat to the flat green, and we can sketch in these shadows now, just a little bit. It's a bit too thin. Yeah. So whenever I feel like the base coat is too prominent, but I also feel like there shouldn't be an highlight there, I can place a shadow. I got like a strong shadow. You can see that if I put the model out of focus, it's looking very metallic. Too much to an extent, which is why I am happy I have decided that I'm going to do a glaze, because this strong yellowish tone is a bit too powerful. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the blending. Right, the blending stage for this model is gonna be what takes the longest out of the whole paint job. I'm personally going to be spending a couple of hours blending all of this. You're probably gonna see a speed up. I'm gonna do a few cuts because I don't want you to just watch me blend, but I'm going to explain you how I'm gonna do it. The way I do it is very similar to how I do it all the time, which is I get myself, for example, let's blend the shadow with the midtone, right? I get myself my base color. I mix it with the color of the shadow, getting a 50-50 mix. I thin it a bit, not too much. I'm not looking to glaze. It's a very thin layer. Okay, something like this. A bit layery. It's not too watery. And I basically paint it in between the two colors. If I feel like it's too bright or too dark, I can reinforce it, going and picking up either the shadow color or the mid-tone color. And I can work on my blend that way. And this will be done across all of the shadows of the model. I will be going back and forth, trying to get myself to have a blend on all of these highlights. So I'm going to be blending the shadows, then I'm going to be blending the first highlight with the mid-tone, then the highlight with the second highlight. Then I'm probably going to highlight again with a white, just to get that strong white, because this yellowish color, although it looks very bright, it actually isn't. It is not a very bright color, so we can make it a lot brighter than that. This just takes a while though. So if you want to, you can do this, which requires a bit more effort, but it is definitely faster. And that's web blending. You can block in the color of the shadow, just re-block it in, and then you can go with the mid-tone and paint it next to it and get the two colors to blend. Doing this will save you a lot of time versus glazing. You can still glaze after you're done with the web blend, but the web blend will give you a bit of a great starting point to work up from. For example, here on the top, I get the base coat color locked in, pick up my shadow, I drag the base coat into the shadow while having the shadow color on the brush. And I get myself a bit of a blend, and I can always go back to the base coat and reinforce it. The colors are still wet. They will blend better and better and better. And this is way faster than just glazing. So I'm going to be doing kind of the same thing all up across the board, blocking in the shadow again after already having blocked it in, and then with the base coat we can paint it next to it and move up and back and forth between the two so that they blend. I won't lie to you, it is very difficult to pull off a good wet blend on such a small area. But if you know how to do it, it is absolutely great because it saves you a lot of time. If you don't know how to do it, maybe it's time to start practicing it because it's fantastic. Okay. And as we blend these colors, it's gonna look less like a hot podge of different colors and more like a real metallic. And the blending doesn't have to be perfect either. Like it can be a bit noisy. I actually like it when it's not super smooth. You can do smooth blending if you want, but I don't know, on a marine, on a model this size, it just, to me, just sounds like a lot of work for very little payoff. Like, it will be very difficult to notice the super smooth blending. And having it detracts a bit of charisma from the model. Like, you can see that, like, just blending the shadow with the midtone has improved the quality of it. And again, just gonna do this all over the place. Play with the consistency of the paint. Have the weaker of the two colors, usually the highlight, be slightly more thicker than the shadow, so that it doesn't get overwhelmed by the shadow. And don't be afraid of moving back and forth. You can make it work. Just believe in yourself, okay? You can get a pretty nice blend that way. So yeah, I'm going to do this across all the shadows, and I will be back. Okay, with the blending done with the shadows, we have to blend the highlights. Now, we can all thank the Lord, because we can blend these highlights a lot more easily than we did blend the shadows. And we can do that by doing an overall glaze. Why? The color I was trying to blend was a brighter color than the shadows, which meant that if I glazed it on top of the shadows, it would barely be noticeable. Which is why I had to go in there and blend the shadows manually one by one. But the color I'm intending to blend now, which is the mid-tone of the color, the flat green, is darker than our highlights, which means that we can easily blend this in by simply doing an overall glaze over all of the model. And it is gonna affect pretty much only the highlights. And that's pretty good because it's gonna tone them down, yes, a little bit, but it's also gonna blend them. Something like this. This is what you could do also with an airbrush if you wanted to. You get yourself an airbrush, you thin the paint an awful lot, you place it in the airbrush, and then you just do a few glazes like this to blend. You could do this with that. I'm okay with a brush, so it takes me longer to get the airbrush out than just using a brush. So why would I? So yes, we're gonna be giving it a quick overall glaze to tone down these highlights, bring them closer to the mid-tone, and after they are close to the mid-tone, we can re-highlight. And we're not losing these highlights, by the way. We're just turning them closer to what they're supposed to be. Like, we are killing this strong highlight, yes, but we're giving ourselves space to highlight again, and we're also blending at the same time, which is all amazing, and I love it. A couple of glazes like this will be enough. Let the paint dry though, don't touch the glaze while it's drying, or it's gonna get paint off of the model, and that's not very fun. Let me zoom out a bit so I don't go off cam by chance. This won't get you a perfect blend. You still have to work a little bit, which means that after doing all of this glazing, we can re-highlight a little bit, adding some of that sunny skin tone to our green. Not as bright as we have on the model, but brighter than the mid-tone. And we can gently work this color in to blend. You can see that we're getting some pretty good blends here. Okay, we can do a wet blend here in the center of the shield. It's a lot easier than just, blending. Drag the color into each other, get our shadow color back, and drag it into the midtone, reinforcing the midtone if we lose it. All very easy, right? Okay. Now we have to highlight once more with a very strong color. I'm gonna be using a heavy body. The reason why I intend to use a heavy body and not a Chimera White, for example, if I find it, it's because heavy bodies are very low coverage, which make them amazing for this kind of work, where you dump the color onto the model and then you blend it in quickly with feathering or other techniques. It's a lot harder to do with paints like Chimera White. So I don't suggest using Chimera White for this stage, but instead suggest using a heavy body. I'm gonna be mix the two together, making myself a very bright yellowish color. I'm gonna thin it a little bit. You wanna thin heavy bodies quite a little bit because they are very greasy, okay? So have them thinned. And now we can block in our strong highlight on this non-metallic, which is gonna give us that nice metallic glint. And since I'm working with a heavy body, I can easily extend the paint and sort of blend it as I place it. Which is allowing me to skip a step. Still keeping the highlights fairly small here in the lower parts of the model. You can see how much of a difference it makes having this strong light, this glint of brightness that really looks like the metal is reflecting the light source back at you as you look at it. It's super important to have in your non-metallic. When you paint non-metallic, if you think you've gone bright, go brighter. Always go brighter. Always, always go brighter. As I said earlier, it's very easy to blend this in because you place it and then you extend it. I block in the color, I clean the brush, and then with a clean brush I extend it. And in extending it, I am blending it. Because the color has very little coverage once thinned. Well, once extended, really. Not when once thin. Everybody's lose coverage when you extend them, which makes them amazing because you can block them in and then extend them, and that will get you a nice blend without too much effort, which is why they are so good for your last highlight. This shield gives you a good idea of the blending power. Almost like oil paints. In big areas, you don't want to paint them in too much. Just block them in, let them dry, and block them in again. Otherwise, they become super chalky, and you don't really want that. Right? Agilites are super important when doing non-metallic, which is why it is so painful to paint Space Marines in non-metallic. It's not the volumes the issue, it's the Agilites, dude. You have to paint so many of them. You can see that I'm painting this highlight without fully covering the volume of the previous highlight. I'm not painting inside of it, I'm painting it close to the edges to give, as I said, that illusion of glint, right? Okay, I'm pretty happy with how the armor is looking so far. We will definitely Might have to do some changes once we have painted other details in, but for now we can work on getting ourselves a shadow color, sorry, an OSL color happening on it. And, you know, I'm just going to be using Chimera Orange, like I did for the base, if I can find it. And from there, we're going to be just adding the color in and blending it in with the armor. First off, let's block it in. I don't need to go as bright. We can keep it a bit more dark. Okay, something like this. And we're going to block it in. Don't really want too much of it on our model, but we do need some of it. Otherwise, what is the point of having the lava on the base? This is more than enough, actually. Okay. We can pick our black up, thin it quite a lot, and use it to blend this orange with the rest of the model. Okay, we're of course going to be having a bit more OSL on on the cloth and the non-metallic between his legs, but as far as the armor goes, I think we're good here. And I think we're good in general with the armor. One thing I want to do is work a little bit on shading some areas a bit more to create some more volume. So I'm going to be getting our shadow color. I'm going to thin it a little, and I'm going to be trying to push these shadows a little bit more so that we get a more interesting result. For example, here. We can focus more. We can use the shadows to create volumes and the volumes to create focus. I want the painter to be more focused, so I am pushing the shadow. Makes sense, right? For example, up here. Okay. Okay, I think that overall we're good. Looks a bit weird right now because we missed colors from the model, so like the contrast is incredible because of the black next to a lot of details, but I think that we're good with the armor. It was a long video, but I hope you enjoyed it. We did I mean, I think I showed you the ally placement across the board. I think I showed you how to blend in different ways. I showed you the colors I used, ideas. I think it was interesting. Let's move on to, I don't know, the rest of the details. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.